Hello and welcome to this edition of Week in One. I'm Andrea van Wyk. UNICEF says men should be the real target of HIV/AIDS prevention programs, especially for those dating young girls. The UN Children's Rights Advocacy Group says while South Africa is doing well in dealing with the pandemic, it needs to change its thinking around who it's educating. UNICEF has released its global HIV/AIDS figures for children and adolescents ahead of World AIDS Day. ENCA reporter Zikhona Chona was there.
More than 500,000 children and adolescents worldwide will be infected with HIV each year by 2030. And 56,000 of them will die as a result of AIDS-related causes. That is 80 each day. These are UNICEF's predictions for the future if things don't change. The advocacy group says while globally there has been progress in reducing the number of annual infections and deaths, the statistics aren't improving fast enough.
We are successfully identifying over 80% of the pregnant women that are living with HIV and getting them onto treatment. And that's resulted in a huge decline in the numbers of babies born with HIV each year. What we're not doing so well on is in preventing adolescence, and in particular adolescent girls and young women, but adolescent boys as well.
South Africa is doing better in the fight against HIV/AIDS than most African countries. But UNICEF says what is driving the pandemic is older men dating younger girls. Often these girls don't know about prevention and the men don't disclose their status.
So our approach is to say, let's do the best we can to protect and educate young women about the risks, give them the tools and skills that they need to protect themselves, but at the same time, let's recognize that there are two parts to the equation. It's not just young women getting infected, it's their male partners infecting them. So we have to also address that aspect of it.
Sadie Brown found out she was HIV positive at the age of 14 while she was on a school trip. At the time, she had no idea that she had been born with the virus. She is now 23 and an activist aiming to provide the support and spread the information that she never received. Brown says one of the biggest challenges young people face is being stigmatized, even by those who are meant to provide a safe space for them.
I personally feel like going to a clinic, it needs to feel like a safe space. Yeah. And if you're going to be judged at home and you get judged by the community and you still get to the clinic and you still get judged there by professionals, it's where do you run to? Yeah. Who do you talk to?
UNICEF says more needs to be done when it comes to investing in treatment and prevention programs for the youth. This is to ensure that the number of infections is reduced even further. Zikhona Chona, Johannesburg.
As we mark the 16 days of activism campaign against the abuse of women and children, Doctors Without Borders has released a grim report. It shows that government is failing to protect child survivors of rape. The humanitarian organization says nearly half of all health facilities in the country meant to care for survivors of sexual violence do not offer counseling services to child survivors of rape. The report says children represent at least half of all rape survivors. ENCA's Maseho Ratlaha reports.
These are just some of the statements made by young women who have been sexually violated, some of them at a very young age. What Doctors Without Borders also found is that among care facilities that do offer counseling, counselors are largely not properly trained and equipped.
We tried to provide counselling programs to the lay counsellors last year. And as you know, lay counsellors, they come in with very limited training. They have 2 to 3 weeks of training. And at the health facilities, they are expected to provide the trauma counselling to survivors.
It's both detrimental to the patient and also to themselves because they do not have the faculties to deal with vicarious trauma as someone with a formal training.
For the survivors, the findings do not come as a shock.
In terms of mental health, fortunately, I was lucky enough to only have to go through the private health system. And even there, not counting the long waiting lists and having to sleep on metal chairs and waiting for a bed. I mean, going into a private health facility and getting immediate care, there are people who are unwilling, people who don't understand, people who say, oh, why do you need to see a counsellor now? Can't you wait until the morning?
The aid organization says severe health consequences of rape can be prevented or lessened with timely access to correct and proper mental and physical care. Masegora Hlaga, Newtown.
A religious rights group says parents should have the right to choose what is best for their children, even if it includes spanking. Freedom of Religion SA is fighting a High Court judgment which declared all forms of physical correction by parents of their children unlawful. That was after a father was found guilty of assault for beating his 13-year-old son. ENCA's Zanka Tolme has more from the Constitutional Court.
Freedom of Religion South Africa argues they're completely against the abuse of children, but it says it does support the rights of parents to decide what is best for their children.
A 13-year-old, a young, slight 13-year-old, who responds well to a slap on the buttocks when he needs chastisement, that would not be unreasonable, immoderate. But a strapping 13-year-old who's entering the stage of puberty and somewhat rebellious, well, that would be unreasonable, but that's only going to be the start of something that's going to get worse.
It became apparent in court that reasonable chastisement is a grey area, which many say leaves children vulnerable.
If you slap a child, do you accept that is prima facie assault?
Prima facie, potentially an assault.
The same with if you slap another person, that is prima facie assault, is it not?
Well, it depends. If it was an intentional slapping of another person, while there may be some room to work around whether it was unlawful or not, it would be prima facie and potentially an assault.
Those against it say the aim is not to charge parents with a crime, but rather to guide them in finding a way to positively discipline their children.
We would submit that there isn't a compelling reason why the other rights of religion, cultural practice and so forth should trump the rights of children here.
4SA says Parliament should deal with the matter instead of the High Court just abolishing the law of defence. Zanka Tolme, Johannesburg.
Still to come, Eskom can barely keep its head above water with financial statements in the red.